Welcome back, everybody, to the Relief and Resource Co. and the Bar Talk podcast, coming to you from Fenton, Michigan. Thank you very much for joining us. I am your host, John Foley, with me, as always, Courtney Booms.
Hello there.
Marc Miller.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us for our 25th episode.
Woo!
Which is pretty great.
25
for a year.
episodes.
I'll take 25 episodes in a year.
Yeah.
One hundo.
And thank you to iLogic Media Production Company. Please check out all of their wonderful content. Lots to look at there. Lots of different kinds of shows, different subject matter, etc. So today is the second in our Cocktail Greats series. So we started this series by looking at the life and the works of David Wondrich, cocktail writer for Esquire, author of a number of books. And we're going to jump in today with the second in this series, and we hope to do many of these today with Jim Meehan, who we'll get into how he kind of directly follows Wondrich, both in his influence, his admitted influence, and also kind of in our current cocktail culture, because I think there is a direct line.
Oh yeah.
From what Wondrich did to what Meehan did to the culture that we're currently in terms of like a linear influence. But he is in more so even than Wondrich, he's known as a bartender and then an author.
Yeah.
Where Wondrich sometimes makes drinks and has recipe input and lots of philosophy on how drinks are built, but was an author first and a cocktail historian. And Meehan, it kind of went the opposite way. So I think a lot of people are very fond of Meehan's work because they came to his work as a working bartender.
Yeah.
We'll get into a lot of that with your.
He's been behind the stick, you could say.
Yeah, well, he's very influential.
Yeah.
Because of that, and his work is very, very, very cool, and I'm really excited to talk about him because I really like Jim Meehan a lot. I have not met him. I'm sure he's a very nice person, but the work that he's done has been a big influence, and I'm grateful for what he's put out into the world content-wise because it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So, Courtney.
Yes, John.
What do you know about Jim Meehan?
I wanted to say first that I like the way that you phrased it because it makes it sound like they're kind of the yin to each other's yang as far as experience goes in the beginning, at least.
Well, I was going to mention this later, and I think I'll just mention it now because it's fresh in my mind. We could have easily done this chronologically, right? We could have gone back and started talking about Jerry Thomas and talked about other people like David Embry or other people who kind of influenced early cocktail culture, like gold and silver era of American bartending. But I think it's rather cool and appropriate for where we are right now that we started with Wondrich and Meehan, even more so than starting with like Aubrey Sanders and Dale DeGroff, because I think those two have almost some of the biggest influence on what we do currently. They were influenced by those other people that came before, but this is what younger bartenders who are working now, this is what they were reading, what they were looking at.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I have it in my show notes too. As a man who once described himself as living in the shadow of David Wondrich's great ideas. I think he personally makes a wonderful second subject to our particular series here with classic cocktail greats.
Sure. And if you're a 25-year-old bartender, you might certainly know Meehan, and by virtue of him, Wondrich, and the Cocktail Codex from Death and Company, and not know who Gaz Regan is, for instance.
That's true. Maybe a little bit more singular.
Unless you're our server Chase, who is obsessed with Gaz Regan.
He is obsessed with Gaz Regan, yes. We got to get him one of those finger spoons for a gift. Yeah.
We really should.
How that worked for his baking.
But I think there is a recency bias with it, with what you're influenced by.
Yeah.
So those books, the Green Meehan book, and the Death and Co. book, the black one and the Cocktail Codex, those are 2 or 3 of the books that I find most of the younger bartenders I talk to have read or are reading.
Yeah, maybe because of the way that it kind of lays out really clearly practice and technique and ingredient lists and why.
And to my knowledge, Aubrey Sanders didn't really write a book.
Yeah.
And the Gaz Regan book is old, and the Jerry Thomas stuff is all old, and The Fine Art of Mixing Cocktails is old, and the Japanese book is Japanese, so American, bartenders haven't read it. These books are the most recent timestamp of influence for younger bartenders.
So they're a bit more accessible, you could say.
Well, yeah, and I think they're the most urgent for us to talk about
Yeah.
now, and then we can go back and do all that other cool
Yeah.
shit.
It
later.
makes a lot of sense too, because like anything that you're researching as time goes on, it gets kind of adapted to the modern era or
Yeah.
whatever new techniques are learned now or whatever kind of efficiency is going on now. So it's more common for you to find maybe this Meehan bartender's manual over, like you were saying earlier, some of the stuff like Jerry
Yeah.
Thomas or Harry Craddock say.
Yeah, and most likely it was in somebody else's hand that you knew before it got to you.
True. Mine's beaten to shit. And that's exactly because I took it from eBay. But yeah,
Well, but you
someone else
used
used it before I
but
used
you've also
it.
used it
I
as a
also use
manual,
it, yeah.
like a working manual.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in 6 years of working here, I've never actually purchased a cocktail book.
Because
Except,
we
well,
have
Well,
unless,
we
it's, unless it was as like have my own copy, but reading them first originally.
Well,
not
we have some.
purchased.
Yeah, we bought them all.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's. I mean, try to maintain a library at
The
least.
library.
Yeah. Even if half the servers just come down and be like, "Oh, that's cool. You got a lot of books. Oh, you want to borrow one? Maybe later."
Intimidation.
Maybe later. Let's go to the pub.
Yeah. Anyway, so Jim Meehan,
Yeah. So we talked about
bi-coastal influence.
bi-coastal. Ooh, yeah, that's an
He
interesting way to
does,
put it.
right? Yeah.
Wow.
So I think the bi-coastal influence is because originally he's from the Chicago area. Meehan started out bartending as a freshman while taking classes at the University of Wisconsin Madison, in 1995.
A
So
legendary drinking school.
Yeah.
I mean, a legendary drinking
They can
school.
get down.
almost as bad as Western.
No,
Western.
no. Don't
Oh.
besmirch the Broncos. I think University of Madison actually has the per capita numbers
To back it up. Yeah.
outflex. They are a Big Ten school. We're a MAC school. I don't know if we have the numbers.
Fair.
Maybe not.
Well, he was majoring
Come on,
in
Broncos. We can do better.
he's majoring in English literature and African American studies when Long Island's and Alabama Slammers were the drink du jour at said University of Wisconsin Madison. By 23, he knew he wanted to stay in the industry, so it kind of does follow a similar pattern as Wondrich, like we were saying before. But instead of sticking into academics, he decided to he finished his degree, but he decided to go to New York, where his brother Peter had moved. He was working as a freelance food writer, and he was inspired by his numerous visits with his brother and the successes he found, and decided he'd go ahead and try his hand at the big city as well. He graduated in 2002 and moved there maybe just a few months, apparently after 9/11. When in interviews he had said that New York was kind of not dried up of tourism, but it was a little more solemn at the time. And so
Sure,
you
yeah.
found a lot less going on than perhaps you would have.
The city was insular.
Prior.
The city was
Yeah.
curved inwards.
Curved into
Yeah.
itself. Yeah, exactly. But in New York, he did get his start at the 5 Points on Great Jones Street, where they kind of specialized in $5 martinis using well vodka and boiron puree. So it's just the brand of fruit puree du jour, kind of like we might use Monin
I saw
syrup.
that.
instead
I
of
was
Yeah.
like, I
Coffee
have
Shop
no
or
idea
something
what that
like
is.
And
Yeah. So for context, use the term martini extremely loosely
right.
in this particular
It's
case.
in a glass up with
Yeah.
vodka and things.
And
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
And things. So they specialized in those $5 martinis and $1 oysters. So there was plenty of like overflow, like plenty of people to be serving, but it wasn't necessarily like the fine dining that he was looking in for. And he took a brunch bartending shift because no one else wanted to. I'll say I've worked brunch bartending shifts before
Ugh.
and they suck balls. Hate it. You have to
Ugh.
prep all the garnish. You got to get like all your rims ready for Bloody Mary style cocktails and just get ready for pouring bubbles, and it's going to overflow every single friggin' time. So
Plus you're running brunch service,
yeah.
which means you deliver the food. Can I have a side of syrup? Yes. Can I have a Bloody Mary? Yes. Can I have a bubble cocktail? Yes. Can I have a
Need
side of
more
ketchup?
butter
Yes.
for
I don't
my
need more
waffles.
butter.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's just the constant style of like nickel and dime requests in brunch service. I mean, to all you brunch warriors out there, God bless you, because I am old and grumpy and no longer have the patience for it whatsoever. It is a tough shift,
I
and
could
it
never
typically
do it.
starts at 8 or 9, and it goes late. It goes to like
Goes to
3 or
like
4.
4,
That's
yeah.
a long shift
Yeah.
full of running
More
your
butter
ass
for
off.
your muffin? Would you like me to butter your muffin?
Oh yeah.
So he did brunch shifts. They made him wait tables as well because he was looking for those like nighttime bartending shifts, but there weren't any open yet. So they're like, well, I'll throw you some hours on the tables. And eventually he found that, even though it wasn't really the place for him, in the few years that he was there, he really appreciated Danny Meyer and Steve Henson for changing the attitude of looking for enthusiastic and apt learners instead of long-term experience. Because everywhere else that he had went to, they're like, no, you have to have at least 2 years of bartending experience in New York before I'd ever put you in my bar. And at the 5 Points, it was a little bit different. They're like, yeah, you look like you're into it. If you're willing to put the work behind it, you're willing to do these crappy bar shifts, then I'll put you behind where there's nicer bar shifts, if you will.
This is going to come up again, but there's probably no better way. This is the blueprint. If you really want to do it and you want to learn, you're going to have to pay your rent along the way too. So you got to take a job somewhere. Just get a job somewhere. And chances are, if you're in a place where there is a semi-vibrant restaurant and bar scene, you will eventually meet somebody who knows somebody else who's hiring. And that's how you move around. Sure. But you've got to pay your rent and you've got to do some bullshit first. So yeah, sometimes it's shuffling kegs, sometimes it's stocking shelves, sometimes it's working brunch, sometimes it's working at some dive bar that you'd much rather drink at than work at. However, you have to do something to gain experience and to get to know people. And that also allows you to eventually go other places with those people and watch and listen and learn, which is what he does.
Yeah.
And how he digs in. He's a good blueprint for putting your nose down and just getting experience, raw hours and time. Because even at a brunch shift or a dive bar, you're still going to learn routine, service, and so much.
I'm sure there are Midwesterners who don't fit this profile, but I feel like being from the Midwest, the working your bones to the grindstone, if you will, is sometimes
very blue collar.
Midwesterners are like super good at like, yeah. Only 2 years of this, sure. I get it. Like just kind of bust through, and then maybe within the first year you're already bar manager or something like that. Depends on where you're at and how well you do. But
it's so weird because this industry shifts so quickly.
Yeah,
like it can look like nobody's hiring. It can look like you can't get a job anywhere, and in 6 months, it can be vastly
everyone
different.
is hiring.
Yeah.
It's strange, but he does use this same philosophy that he learned from 5 Points from the owners there. And Danny Meyer in particular, I know, is a really great business writer about as far as like how to operate your business and keep your staff happy. And he uses those kind of mental mindsets, I should say, in PDT and when he hires elsewhere. But food and wine pairing does come naturally to him afterwards, after the 5 Points. He's a really staunch supporter of seasonal market-driven food. And in the period of his beverage education, he thought he would become a sommelier until he met Eben Freeman in 2003, who was the bar manager of WD-40, which is just a bar that like was around the corner from where he lived at the time. And he even had taken him to Milk and Honey. Milk and Honey is now
very famous bar,
now called Attaboy, super famous bar. He remembers his time
was
there.
Was that Sasha Petrasky?
Yeah. He remembers his time
Rest
there,
in
the
peace.
experience. Them having no bar menu, but having like an omakase style of making a drink for you. So you just sit and you chat, a couple questions maybe from your wait staff. You give them what you're feeling, like what your mood is today, and then they bring out, on a really nice bar cart exactly what you were looking for, whether you knew it or not. Which is something that we try to do at least an element of that here when guests are receptive to it. But in general, it's been something that he found for himself as a guest will create such a nice, amazing experience that you're just always willing to come back there, pretty much anytime.
Also, especially in the cocktail world, it's an easy in to conversation. Mm-hmm. You don't have to talk about sports or what people do for a living. Half the people who come in here don't want to talk about what they do for a living whatsoever. I have regulars that don't even know what they do because I figure if they want to tell me, they'll tell me. Yeah. If they most likely they don't want to talk about it and they don't want to rehash their whole entire day by the time they finally sit down at 7 o'clock. Right. Talking about the drink that you're about to make them, asking questions, you've already had a conversation, and it's to the benefit of your service.
You're choreographing their experience.
Yeah, you're literally making your job easier.
Yeah.
One of my favorite phrases to use behind this bar is "Don't look at the menu, talk to me."
Right. Some people want to dive into a menu.
Yeah,
and
which is fine,
I usually like to dive into a menu.
Yeah.
You know? Or some,
like if you give them a couple minutes, you can see they're still struggling. Then I'll be like,
that's
let me
the
help
time
you.
to
it
do
becomes really easy to see. Or some people want to order something off the menu and then like, okay, now I have a drink. Now I can talk. Now I want to talk about what I'm going to have next. And maybe that's the custom.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the thing. But again, what you'll see throughout the show, and we're going to mention it over and over, is a really good blueprint to how to get good at this job.
Yeah.
He followed a really, I think, strategically excellent path to making himself good at this job.
To a degree. So he had made a bit of his name, he had made a bit of a name for himself at Gramercy Tavern, but it was later on when he was working at a restaurant called Pace, where he met the editor of Food and Wine Cocktail Book through his brother Peter. It's a book that Meehan would actually later become an editor of as well. And at the time of the first meeting with that editor, he was going around interviewing all the country's top mixologists, and Meehan had asked him if he was planning to or had already met Audrey Saunders, Saunders, at the Pegu Club, which he had. And he asked, basically insisted that this editor ask her to come and dine at Pace, which she eventually did a couple months later. And Meehan was able to serve her directly and culminated in asking to come work with her and her team at Pegu Club, which she would open only a few months later after that. So he opened up the bar program with her, and it was mentioned time and again his appreciation for Saunders' tutelage in helping him shape himself as a mixologist and the bar owner that he is today. In 2007 at Pegu Club, he was named Star Chef's Rising Star Mixologist, so he kind of put his name out there in New York, which is notoriously a very big city and hard to get your name out. And at the time, there were so few people who were like properly interested in cocktails back then that he would be offered consulting opportunities like left and right. And he said a lot of the times that he didn't actually, like, he was faking it till he made it the whole time. But eventually that kind of invited confidence grew into true confidence. And he mentioned again in an interview with, I think, the Speakeasy podcast, that Saunders ran Pegu Club as a dysfunctional family with her at the helm as like their mother. And he adopted that same mentality at PDT, where he was the dysfunctional family's dad.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that would work out in almost any bar situation, because most people who work in the bar industry, not everyone, are like just a bunch of misfits, and you are working together to create all of this experience for everybody else that you yourselves need to be taken care of by your team lead or your bar owner or whoever it is that's kind of running the show. I found it to be very sentimental.
Just as a quick aside, the Speakeasy podcast you're talking about, is that the one that's hosted by like Souther Teague?
Yes.
And yeah.
Nice.
That is a great podcast.
That is a great podcast. Yeah.
So that's part of the evolutionary change in how restaurants and bars are run
Today. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have these kind of a number of different stereotypes. The completely absentee owner who doesn't care, who comes in and just barks at people and might just cruise in and bring in friends and then adjust the lights and then peace out. You have.
How irritating
the
that
lights.
would be.
I know somebody
constant.
who was
That's
described that way, and I thought, oh, it's awful. And this was from a former employee who had worked for them. I heard this description of somebody years ago, and I was always like, wow, what an annoying ass thing to do. And then you've got the corporate style of management with lots of things that are laminated and lots of checklists and lots of just very bottom line driven decisions that kind of suck the soul out of the culture. And yeah, bars need to make money to survive. And then people will have jobs. However, there are ways to cultivate that, I believe, that are different than these kind of anti-humanist styles of management. And that description of how Saunders did it and how Meehan did it, I think is a really good one for an environment. It's a good one for any environment, but it's a good one for an environment that wants to foster creativity.
Oh yeah.
And wants to foster creativity, and also the interaction with the guest that is necessary to keeping that creativity going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's all mercenary and they just order vodka, and tonics, and you don't ever your cocktail program dies.
Yeah, I think you really do have to let people kind of ride their own wave. And if it works out for them, it works out great. And if it's a mistake of whatever reason, they took it a little too far, then that's just a learning experience and they move on with.
Well, and then it'll also, that style of, like service or whatever, it'll kind of weed out the people who are, just doing it as like a paycheck versus the people who are doing it because they have like a passion for it. And, they're into the whole idea of the service and the idea of the bar and all that.
Yeah.
But this idea of a dysfunctional family, also, I think pushes forward the idea that every person needs to be taken on their own terms.
Sure.
Managing people is a case-by-case basis and not subject to corporate style training templates and the timelines that go along with them.
Yeah.
There have been people here who, if I had run this bar the way that I was taught by some people to run a bar, we would have let go.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you never know how long it's going to take for someone to blossom. You never know how much personality will come out in 6 months.
Right.
You know, just quick, you know, aside, our friend Lexi is running a bar.
I know.
And the UP
I'm so
now.
happy for her.
Shout out to Lexi.
About a month into her as a host, I was like, this is never going to work. She won't even say boo to me. And I think she's frightened every single time she talks to anybody, guests included. And I think that everybody needs something different from a management style, and the whole team kind of embraced her and worked with her. And I can't wait to go up to St. Ignace and have a drink at her bar. So
great success story, that Lexi.
Way to go.
Oh yeah. I was going to say this a little bit later, but you've brought it up, so it kind of makes great timing. It's he's being interviewed by barnrestaurant.com, and as a takeaway for his teaching style, I'd like to quote him. So, I've switched my management philosophy around to promote a culture that rewards independent, self-sufficient, accountable staff members who only come to me when they've exhausted their own problem-solving resources, and I'm grateful for it. My teams appeal to a broader consumer audience because we have more than one way of approaching everything we do. So in that sense, you know, it's new and seasoned workers alike that might have great ideas or value. And if you stick to your own ways, like you're saying, if you're sticking to this like corporate management style, then you're never going to be able to see that or even take that in. So it's really about like listening and working with your team instead of just kind of like always communicating to them what they need to do. So he's employing this idea that, you know, if you teach your team right, if you like really work with them and put a lot of confidence in them, they'll find their own ways of propelling your business forward in a positive light. And
it will be done within the overarching philosophy, because if you're taking the time, they'll have already bought in to that philosophy. And then they're just like, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do it. And I know I'm still treating the business right.
Yeah.
That's how it's an awesome quote about, especially in this industry.
Good job, Meehan. So we talked a little bit about how he kind of made his way up, but the place that he's known for the most, of course, is PDT. So he co-founded PDT, shorthand for Please Don't Tell, in 2007, where guests enter through Criff Dogs, a creative hot dog stand selling dogs, quote, as unique as New Yorkers themselves, and transports them through a phone booth to a taxidermy and bottle-filled, elegant, intimately dark cocktail bar. Certainly, for the time, PDT was a standout at cocktail culture and the bon vivants experience. And he had taken everything he had learned in his fast track through New York bar scene and applied it to classic styles in a genuinely warm attitude of prohibition cocktail cultures.
The place is tiny.
West through there again. It's like 16. Is it 16 seats or like 44 seats, 16 at the bar?
I think it's 16 at the bar. And it's smaller than we are here by a touch. Yeah. But it's one of those long, narrow bars.
Yes.
The bars on the one side. And everything else kind of up against the wall.
Bottles all over over the wall, yeah. And
this is it. This is the legendary bar. This is where people, you know, where we start hearing about him and what he's doing. Because the concept is awesome. The telephone booth is awesome. The fact that they just serve hot dogs is awesome. That they make great drinks. And the whole experience is amazing. But there's no Meehan show here. There's no book if it was just the phone booth.
Right.
The cool entrance only works once. Everything else that they did once you were inside, that's what is keeps a major stamp in terms of influence on current cocktail culture.
Yeah. And part of that is to do, he notes that his brother is a little bit of a help and influence in that because of his connections with the food and beverage industry, but also his own tenacity to learn and fill his portfolio with people in the industry that he like sought out to get to know, like Audrey Saunders, for instance. Yeah. But as far as that, you know, the bar successes go, he turns that into writing, and that's where we get, for instance, the manual. So he starts out writing for Food and Wine Cocktails book. Like I mentioned before, he was an editor for that for several years. He also makes mention Mr. Boston's Bartender's Guide. He's contributed to that, which is one of John's favorites.
Such a silly book.
And the Sommelier Journal, when he was anticipating sommelier training as well. But he does come to appreciate wine and everything as well. His works like the PDT cocktail book, which is arguably his first big publication, and the manual are two of the most popular works for both people in the industry and those genuinely interested in learning for themselves as a home hobby, you might say. And I'd certainly say that the cocktail book is vastly easy to interpret, no matter who you are. But the manual is a little bit more like exactly as described, right?
It's an
the
industry
hows
book.
and whys, and it's
It's
how
more
to
of an
get
industry
there.
book.
Yeah.
The PDT cocktail
That's a
book
big old boy.
is an awesome book to have at home. The art is wonderful. The builds are pretty easy.
Yeah, usually like maybe 5, no more than 5 ingredients.
Yeah, a lot of really, really fun stuff, classics and good stories that go along with the cocktails that aren't classics. That book is eminently usable right when you buy it for whomever. I think.
Yeah.
That was a book that I remember when it came out. I bought it, and it got kind of passed around quite a bit. And there's a little bit about how to build your bar, what the sink should look like, where to hang your tools. Like there's a lot of like little bit of working hints in there too.
Logistics and strategy as far as like how to build
logistics is a good way to put it.
Yeah, because the PDT cocktail book was modeled kind of after the Savoy cocktail book. It has about like 200 pages of classic and modern cocktail recipes. So he's quoted as using Audrey Saunders, David Wondrich, Don Lee, Julio Bermeo, and Dale DeGroff, Sean Howard, Lydia Rissmuller. How do you pronounce her name?
Rissmuller.
Anyway, they're all arranged in alphabetical order, which I personally appreciate. I love an alphabetized list. They venture from fairly simple to slightly more complex, only in the sense of like technique. For instance, like a julep, how to crush your ice and how to properly distribute the salt and mint, etc., or sugar and mint. Excuse me.
Oh, I can tell you all about that.
Yeah, you worked on Saturday. Did you sell a lot of juleps on Saturday?
For like 2 hours.
Awesome.
Yeah, for like the first hour and a half, as it always goes, and then no one cared about
Gotcha.
it.
7 o'clock, Derby's over, man.
Sugar and mint bourbon slushies. But the recipes are clearly laid out, few sentences of description, and it's simply the best recommendation for flavor profile as far as like what brands he chooses for those cocktails.
You read that book and you realize it doesn't feel like brand sponsorships. It feels like this is just what we use at the bar.
Yeah, it's
this
well
is what
dispersed.
we like.
It's not like he's favoring one over the other.
Not really. But there's a bunch of little tiny things that show like some really great genuine authorship. And that's what I noticed about it the first time I read it. Like the wine that they use when they talk about wine is really good and cool. And it reminded me that a cocktail bar should have good wine, even if you only have 3 of them. The use of fortified wine and the use of good sparkling, why to use which sparkling that you do use, all the extra stuff was really well thought out, and it made me, when I first read it, research brands that I wouldn't have researched had I not read it. So there were things I didn't know, but were still very straightforward and provided avenues to learn more about different ingredients that I could use in a cocktail.
Yeah, speaking of extra stuff, one of my favorite things about the PDT cocktail book is the addition of short recipes of classic Criff Dogs recipes, I should say.
The hot dog recipes. I've always meant to make
secret
one.
Toppings.
Secret toppings.
He uses recipes, from star chefs like Wiley Dufresne, David Chang, who is on Netflix. He's got a couple different Netflix specials. Yes. Yeah, very good stuff there. Daniel Hum. And the top recommendation from that category is the John Dragon Dog.
John Daragon.
Daragon.
Yeah.
John
Is that the one with the cream cheese on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
It's keto friendly, y'all.
It's keto friendly. Yes.
Yeah. So
except for the bun, right?
Well, you can take it out. Use lettuce.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, I just watched you lick the rim of that glass, and it was very awkward for me.
Well, it's really I rimmed the crap out of it. This is the Jim Meehan beer and a smoke cocktail. So it's it's like the michelada variant, kind of with mezcal and lime and celery bitters and hot sauce, and you top it with beer. But you do this like little celery salt, sugar and salt rim, and it's a cool drink.
Mm-hmm.
It totally. You got to get that rim really in there so you can really enjoy it. But yes, it's a cool idea conceptually, but this is one of the drinks that you can tell he obviously put on there because they were serving hot dogs.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So like this is to go with the hot dogs that you'll be eating when you're in there. Yeah, exactly. There's a mustard cocktail in there too, which is I've actually made. No, it's called the condiment cocktail. That's what it is. Cocktail. And it uses mustard in it, and it's very, very strange.
We had a Chinese
mustard
cocktail. Couple menus
That's
ago.
why I made that mustard. Yeah, because I put mustard in the cocktail. Yeah,
inspiration.
I put mustard in the tiki drink.
What drink was that? I'm trying to remember now.
The name of it?
Yeah.
I can only think of Carl's that use cilantro and turmeric.
There's been so
That's not the same
many
one.
over the
Anyway.
years, you can't keep track of them.
No, I do. I served it in a coupe. It was really good. Nobody bought it. I can't remember the name.
It was really good. I do remember.
And
that,
nobody
yeah.
bought it.
Yeah, and nobody bought it.
So for the PDT cocktail book in 2012, he won James. Sorry, that's a different one. So I'll list some of his awards, shall I? In 2007, he was Star Chef's Rising Star, which we already mentioned. 2009, he won the Spirited Award for American Bartender of the Year at Tales of the Cocktail. Oh, yes, with the PDT Cocktail book in 2012, he was given a Spirited Award for Best Cocktail/Bartending Book. In that same year, he won the James Beard Foundation's first ever Bar Program Award. By 2015, he got the Spirited Award for Best Bar Mentor. In 2018, he took 2 awards, one from Tales for Best Cocktail/Bartending Book, and then another from the James Beard Foundation for Best Beverage Book for the Meehan's Bartender Manual, which we'll talk about next.
That's a hell of a run for 10 years.
That's not so bad.
No.
Yeah. So this gargantuan of a book, looks like the Jolly Green Giant if it was a manual, is modeled after old European motorcycle manuals like Triumph, Indian, Ferrari, etc. And it's hefty but durable with softened edges on the page, so you can pick it up and not get too much jamming on the fingers, things like that. Put it right in front of you at the bar while you're working. You can get it wet and it's easily wipeable. Although I still have a few kind of bar stains on mine.
Some sticky
personally,
pages,
I got some sticky pages. But the pages themselves, as long as you don't fully submerge them, are also really easy to kind of clean off. It's got a great index for references, but also a clearly organized list of chapters. In Meehan's own words, he wanted to use the manual as a way to show new or interested bartenders how to run a bar, how to build a drink, how to do it well, and why it's necessary to do it that way.
The necessary means to.
Yeah, he added inserts from professionals in the industry who he's admitted can do it better, even if it's not his own style. So just picking up randomly, I flipped one with Don Lee. And for those watching, he's got like a really nice kind of profile picture, and then some words of inspiration from him related to the topic in the page itself. And it's a little bit, hipster, making it look like an old road manual for like a Triumph or something like that. And name dropping all over the place, but it does hold great insight for anyone starting off looking for an avenue to learn from where their mentors either may be lacking or where they're searching for more inspiration than time might allow.
And I think after 10 years, I mean, a really, really packed full 10 years where he went from, just running programs to becoming, Jim Meehan with capital letters. This book reads as a way to put it all down somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, this is all of it from the last 10 or 12 years, all that I've got to give.
Collective.
And I'm going to put it in there, and I'm going to throw all the influences in there, and I'm going to tell all the stories. I'm going to talk about all the technique because I have to put it out there. The PDT book is a PDT book. It's a book from that bar. Yeah. And the Death and Company book is a book from that bar. This is one bartender putting the most formative and creative years of their career on a page. Yeah. And I love that because all of our experiences are obviously subjective, but his is so helpful, and it's rendered in a way that is very useful
and very readable. I mean, he's super self-aware about his work and how many years he had to put behind that in order to create the content. But he's also including things like the classic cocktail book principles of crafting, or like drink recipes and families, etc. Like, for instance, he starts off with the history of punch and tons of nods to David Wondrich there, and then the rise of the tiki bar and to today's cocktail renaissance, highlighting the necessity of making your bar an integral part of the community, for instance. That's something that I always found to be kind of lacking in other educational texts about how to start a bar. Like, you really have to put your community first and kind of know where your role is in that as well.
Well, you don't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
You do business in a place, a specific place.
If you put a tiki bar in the mountains, will it go as well as if you had done something different? Maybe.
It might actually really pop off.
It might well. Yeah.
The idea of escapism, yeah.
But that kind of idea where you really kind of count all of your eggs and keep them safe.
Yeah.
One of the passages that caught me was about naming cocktails. So in the book, he highlights first and foremost that a cocktail's name is its marketing. sure, you're selling this list of ingredients, but really the focus should be to highlight what it is that your guests should be expecting within the drink or within the experience of having the drink. So like every good cocktail puts you into a mood or a mindset that you intend to keep for the time that you're drinking it, or it's reminiscent of said name. So like a hanky panky might make you feel a little frisky, or cosmopolitan might put you in the heart of like culture and style or something.
Maybe once upon a
Manhattan's gonna
time.
put you in Manhattan. Yeah. It's
Which
the
is-
idea of it though.
Yes, exactly.
Now our whole concept about naming drinks here really says a lot about us because we have 6 different cocktails with the word black in them. Black Mirror, Black Phillip.
Oh, well.
It's a very dark,
It's a dark
darkly
art.
inspired.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It's an interesting way to put it.
Well, the one way I think other people believe this too. I heard it put this way once, and you see it with cocktail names all the time. The cocktail isn't the album. The bar menu is the album. The cocktail is one of the songs.
Sure.
And that mood lasts for as long as you're listening to the song or as long as you drink the drink.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think, why cocktails get named after songs.
Lots of cocktails are named
But
after songs.
they also get named after things that are evocative of mood or color or things that are just a touch abstract.
Yeah.
I think. Or places, because places are a mood too.
Yeah.
If there's creaminess to it, then you might add some type of like word that resonates with
A lot of times
Yeah.
it starts with like tasting the finished cocktail first, and then the name sometimes comes to you really easily, or sometimes you got to kind of sit and think about it.
Yeah.
What the cocktail makes you think of.
Yeah.
Same thing with a song, or when you're standing there looking at a painting. What is the only thing you can really say about it at first is what it makes you think of.
I think generally it's not necessarily appropriate to think of a name of a drink first and then build a drink based on that.
No, it's a terrible thing.
It's a terrible thing to do. You can do it. I've done it a couple times, but it creates something way different than what you might have thought of before. For instance, trying to do it.
Well,
It's
you're
difficult.
gonna force it every single time.
Exactly.
Right.
That's why it took like 4 menus to get the locomotive breath. I really liked that name,
Locomotive
Yeah.
but I
breath.
couldn't actually think of the drink until I thought of the drink and was like, oh wait, locomotive breath would be a good name for this. Yeah.
And then we made 7 trillion.
Yeah, we
did.
But those are his 2 big books. Talked a little bit about his like back history, you might say, but his influence on the cocktail industry is like all of that combined plus more. So he's moved since starting PDT in 2015 to Portland, Oregon. Had a couple kids living in New York. It's a bit tough to do. He wanted
Living
to
the dream of the
focus on
90s.
them,
He's
and
alive in
start a
Portland.
family and be a little bit more insular to himself. So he moved out to Portland, and he started a couple different things. So he did Stray Dog, which was a pop-up bar at the Big Trouble Bar in Old Town with his old friend Sean Horde, who he opened PDT with, and used some local commissary syrups with some noted success. He's got an app. So there's an Apple. If you buy it from the Apple store, it's $9.99. Imagine that's the same for the Google store. But it's just got a list of a bunch of classic cocktails, a bunch of cocktails from PDT itself. There's a function where you can add the bottles in your home bar, and it'll show you what's missing or what you can make from those bottles. It's been pretty popular. And his Chicago bar, Prairie School, it unfortunately only ran for a short period of time before the Heisler ownership team pulled it in 2018. But it was right across the street from the Google Fulton building with a Frank Lloyd Wright theme. And then Prairie School is reference to a school that was on that location prior, and just kind of mixed Midwestern sensibility with Japanese flavors, but it didn't win over local revenue streams, so it kind of got tossed. He does currently have a satellite bar in Hong Kong for PDT, which opened in 2021, which has been much more successful. It's located on Queens Road in central Hong Kong, and he opened it up with Jeff Bell, who was his kind of lead bartender for the longest time in PDT. He's also won American Bartender of the Year before, and Daniel Valencia. And now he currently operates a consulting firm called Mixography Inc. And mixography is a term that he took from David Wondrich. He had been using it. It's obviously a term that you use for like mixing CDs and stuff when you're a DJ.
Mixography?
Mixography. But it's the combination of mixology and
Biography.
Biography.
I don't know.
Not sure. But
Not sure either. Sounds cool though.
he curated the agency to be able to help other bartenders, bar owners, people in the industry just develop and design their their program to the fullest extent, the way that he's tried to do in his own businesses. He's most notably, they have worked with Takibi, is an izakaya style, I want to say, restaurant in the Pacific Northwest, and then the Centurion Lounge bars, which can be found in numerous airports, including Dallas, Denver, LA, New York, Miami, London, Hong Kong, etc.
Jamaica, Bahamas.
Yeah.
Come on,
Pretty
baby.
mama. He is an ambassador for Banks Rum, speaking of
Yes.
Jamaica.
See, that was the segue. There you go.
Yes, thank you, sir. He has his own brand of Bloody Mary seasonings, like the salt around the rim, you should say, called La Boiti, which he worked on with a master spice blender. And he has his own set of mixology spoons, which we actually carry here at the R&R. As well as bartending bags, rolls, and bar carts, which he
His stuff is
on
really
Warren
nice.
Giles
Yeah,
with
really
for. It's
fancy.
really, really pretty.
That's like a $500 bar roll, the leather one.
The leather bar cart is what surprised me. Like, I don't want to spill anything on a leather bar cart, but it looks really nice.
It's got to be user friendly though. Otherwise,
It probably cleans up really good.
Probably
Really easily.
Warren Giles, good work. Anyway, yeah, I mean, one of the styles of bartending that Meehan perpetuates, and something that we do here, is kind of like that omakase type of service that we mentioned before, and that's kind of one of the biggest things that you pull from the research of what he does or what he offers from mixography, what he does when he's teaching. He's taught at the BAR, so Beverage and Alcohol Resource Team, that Wondrich and DeGroff started. He goes to numerous symposiums teaching this style, and then teaching especially what we mentioned before, where your focus in the beverage industry is not to be quite so controlling, but to be a little bit more freeform, remember the creative aspects of all of it, and to be really focused not on yourself, but on the guests, because it's hospitality first and foremost.
Yeah, it's the whole philosophy, right? It's a very guest forward philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's not a bend over backward and do anything philosophy. It's very centered on conversation and trying to get to the root of what somebody wants, and then using the creativity that you've cultivated over the years to do so.
Yes.
I think you got to remember you're not just your cocktail menu, because somebody's going to come in and not want it. And I think with really, really good cocktail menus and lots of knowledge comes hubris, and comes a dangerous attitude towards the guest. And I think what I like the most about him and what he perpetuates when he speaks is that you got to keep that stuff in check, because eventually you're going to have to work with somebody. You're going to have to coax them and help them find the drink that they want. And it's on you to do it.
Yeah.
You have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also too, at the same time, it's like, it's great to like have that conversation with them, get to know them that way. And it's like, it's a much more different kind of service than like you were talking about earlier, like the corporate style service where like, you know, like you're always checking off the checklist and and all that. It's a much more personable kind of service, which, you know, in my opinion is a lot better. And I feel like the guest gets more out of that kind of service, other than just checking off the checklist.
Well, it also communicates, if you do it well, it communicates the culture of the bar.
Yes.
And they will see your philosophy on how you build drinks.
Yeah.
And then they'll come back for that, not just your menu, but they'll come back for that, because they believe that you have something foundational that you've accumulated that drives the way that you make drinks, that drives the way that you do things, that drives the way that you talk to them and you help them. And that's easier to trust.
Yeah.
Than a menu created in a vacuum before service.
Or like anyone with super egos, right? Because there's plenty of like
That's the
great
worst.
bartenders who have like an aura, of super ego, and that floats around them like a rain cloud. But Meehan has a very obvious level of humbleness to him.
Yeah.
And part of that comes, I was listening to a different interview explaining this belief that he says, you know, you can do 10,000 hours of bartending and still not be a great bartender if you're not being like really focused with intention at the task at hand on not only yourself, but the guests, like I mentioned before. But then that, you know, the day that you're not interested in your own work, you're just kind of going through the motions because you've done it 10,000 times before.
That's the day when you start learning bar flair.
Yeah, that you're just going through the motions to get the paycheck. Wait, what? Did you say bar flair?
Yeah, I said that's when you start learning bar flair.
All right. Anyway, day that you're not interested in your own work, and that you're just interested in picking up the paycheck, and that's not what it's for. You know, you have to be receptive to what's happening, good, bad, or indifferent, and you have to be active to it. And you want to work together with your core group. if your manager is not having a great day, then learn how to rely on your other staff members to kind of pick up the slack so that you can be that person for someone else too when that happens to them. You know what I mean? Like, it's really being kind and humble and approachable to every idea and receptive.
Because you can't do this job without talking to people.
Yes.
If you're
It's
having a shit day, you
literally the
can't
job,
do the job without talking to people. There's plenty
Some
of
days I
jobs
wish.
that you can do
Yeah.
without talking to people. But talking to people and giving service is the job. And in like a highly creative cocktail environment, it's more of the job.
Yeah.
It's way more of the job. And yeah, you're not feeling it, and it's the day that somebody's going to come in and ask about some Indian single malt that you maybe don't feel like talking about because you haven't thought about it in a year. But you have to talk about it.
I would say bring it down, take a sip with them, figure it out together if you like.
Yeah. I think that people want to see that you're still creatively interested and curious and engaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because too much of an attitude, too much hubris, like you said, it follows people around like a cloud, and it isolates you from the people that you're talking to. It's a veneer of defense.
Yeah.
So again, people want to see that you're as engaged with them, but you're their guide.
Yeah.
Right.
You know?
And you can be just that when you're at work. You can go home and play with your dog or go to the park and like have your own sense of self too, but just be present in what you're doing when you're here, when you're at your job or wherever else.
And within yourself. You don't have to be a robot. People like personality.
Oh yeah.
And it's okay to tell people no too.
Yes, it is.
If they just want something stupid, it's okay to be like, no, we don't have that. We don't do that.
Right.
Or maybe soup is not the word. Just
Or like if they don't look at the menu and be like, I'd have this, and be like, I would
Yeah.
love to give you that, but I don't carry it.
Sure. Well, it comes
Here's
back to the
this.
phrase that we
Yeah.
always use. Well, I'll just have, because
Yeah.
they're used to being offered nothing. So they've built up a series of drinks that they just order by default
yeah.
because they know they're safe.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden you come along and you don't offer some of that stuff. And it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to step in and not be annoyed and actually help them out
Right.
and work with them a
This
little
can
bit.
still be a safe space if I don't have a vodka cranberry. Here's
Yeah.
what you can have.
And the more you
Yeah.
read about Meehan, this is what he's about. You know, he's about like just trying to like, hey, this is fun. Cocktails are fun. I like it. I have, thoughts on how I think it should be done. And I'm totally here to help you.
There was another interview, just because that's how I did the research, was basically a series of interviews that I listened to or watched or read. And he said something along the lines of, let's see. Oh gosh, it escaped me this moment I said it out loud. Basically,
Oh no.
we were just talking about.
We were talking about being engaged and enthusiastic.
No,
and
specifically the last few sentences that you said.
stupid drinks.
Stupid drinks. Oh, stupid drinks. Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
Find the triggers. That's how you restart your
Jump
booms.
on point. Yeah.
There's a lot in that brain.
Yeah, no, but there's this idea that you can only have what's comfortable to you. And he had mentioned before in an interview that like one of the best things about going to a bar or working at a bar, is you're part of the party. You
Yeah.
actually get to be part of the party. But if you're a little bit of an introvert like me, I can say for myself, it's nice to be at the party, but you don't necessarily want to be the center of the party. And the bartender is not the center of the party like some bartenders think.
Mhm.
They can be if you need to like kick things up a notch. But really,
You got to
what
work that bar rail. You got to work
Yeah,
that
what
bar
you're
rail.
Yes, you
there
do.
for is to be there for everyone else. So you're still involved. You still get to be social. You have this
facilitating the party.
aspect
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
listening and engaging, but you don't actually have to be like the big. You're not the show.
Yeah. And that's
So-
one of the
The
best.
whole thing is the show. The
Yeah.
whole night is
Yeah,
the show.
the
That's
night
one
is
of the
the
best
show,
like
but-
feelings too, like when you're behind the stick behind the bar and like you have like the majority of your bar rail is all talking to each other and having a great time,
Yeah.
having drinks.
And you're
And you're
facilitating,
just facilitating that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
And the-
you can still walk away
And
do
the
other
music's
stuff.
killing it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can say, well, everybody's having a really good Saturday night.
Yeah.
that. I'm gonna drink some more coffee next time we do this. By the way.
Oh, you a little sleepy there?
Reset. But yeah, I mean, I had added a few fun facts.
Fun facts. We love fun facts.
Meehan said that he'll drink just about anything except for vodka, but one of his favorite classic drinks is the good old Sazerac.
Yes.
That was a slightly later interview. In an earlier interview, he said he drinks at home most days some Japanese whiskey, like a Japanese highball, or maybe some mezcal, for instance, like the drinks that you two guys have. Also, some of his favorite books are David Wondrich Killer Cocktails or Simon Difford's Guide.
The Difford's Guide was such an influential thing for me. And I'm really happy. I was happy to see this because Meehan's just, I think he's a little bit older than I am. But the first guy was important because it was the first thing I could get that had a bunch of recipes in it.
Yeah.
Like it had, like when I was in college in the late 90s and early 2000s, I loved those books. And there was they used to come in magazines and you could buy like the end of the year book. But man, that is how I learned so many early recipes and then learned how they didn't work or did work.
Did or did not work. I like it. Ted Haig's Vintage Spirits and Forgotten Cocktails was another one as well. Yeah. You
read that book now and it's like just half of a classics menu from some craft cocktail bar because everybody read that book and they're like, oh, let's do this. Nice. You know, some of the drinks don't work, but some of them do. And a lot of them are just things that you totally take for granted, like Corpse Survivors that are just all over the place now.
Gosh, I love a Corpse Survivor.
You can't get away from the Corpse
any
Survivor.
Variant.
No.
You like a Corpse one.
I love the Corpse one, yeah.
I like a Corpse two.
Just depends on what you're feeling that day, you know?
Yeah, or if it's summer.
Or if it's summer, yeah.
Yeah, summer v autumn, Corpse one, autumn, summer, Corpse two. If you're a seasonal drinker.
Mm-hmm.
That's most of what I had. I do want to, my own personal closing thought was that, was from when he was asked, what does success mean to you? Meehan replied, success is all relative. I've met so many people who have had everything and are unsatisfied, and those who have very little from material standpoint who seem super content. I added the super in there. I wake up every day and try to do something to grow as a person. I'm driven and life takes unexpected turns. As long as I can adapt to those changes and maintain the will to be excellent at whatever I do, things will work themselves out in the end. Which I find to be a really super cool personal philosophy, which maybe I adapt some of that myself.
Well, it's like when, we're like talking before the shift, like, what do you think tonight's going to be? It's like, there's no point in even like guessing anymore. It's like, what's going to happen will happen,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, you open the doors, you see who walks in.
Roll with the punches.
And you just try to adapt to it.
One of my best nights on the Tiki Hut was like a super storm 1 hour later. So it's like the perfect first hour of service and then whoosh, rain all over the place.
And you were standing in a puddle.
Yes.
Trying not to get electrocuted as you had to remind me to pull all the cords up.
Yes. Sorry.
That was a good night.
Yeah.
In the words of Charlotte Ruffini, hell yeah, brother, run it.
Yeah. But cool if you decide to read anything about Jim Meehan or learn anything about him, remember that I think his philosophy towards what he does is excellent. And I think it's my favorite. I used to think it was the recipes that I took from him the most, but it's not. It's how to do this for a while and how to do it in a way that keeps yourself engaged, that keeps you good at it, and that from somebody who likes to learn, it keeps it from getting very static.
Yeah.
How you approach each day, it's something that I still struggle with 20 years into this job. But just doing a show and reading over Courtney's research like this one, it's invigorating.
It reminds you of some things you might have forgotten about. Yeah. Or kind of like the key to happiness is learning how to be. No, the key to life is learning how to be happy through the passage of time. Wow. That's what life is, passing time.
Oh, yes. Big Bird said that.
Are you uncomfortable? This is the deepest show we've ever done.
Yes, we are going very deep, it seems. All right. I think that's it for this episode. Yeah.
It is. Are you closing it down? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Booms was over there mouthing that's what she said. So I think we better wrap it up.
Yeah. Can't help it, yo.
I almost made myself a Jimmy Roosevelt, but I didn't want it clanking around.
because the big.
Yeah.
It's served in stemware, but with a big cube.
With a big cube.
I figured I would either hit the microphone.
Yes.
Or it would just like clink around the whole
Jonathan
time.
Cole would be like, what the?
Yeah. It sounded like a Frank Sinatra
Sean.
interview after a show.
All right. Well, I think that's it. Before we wrap up, the usual shout outs. Check us out on social medias: Facebook, Relief and Resource Co., Instagram, Relief and Resource, Twitter, Relief_Resource. I think that's it.
I think it is too. Join us for our next episode where we
believe it's Speyside.
We're going back to Scotland. Just the breezy drams for your summer porch sip.
Light and floral, if you will.
Enjoy, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Welcome to WNIC Nice Radio. It's all bunnies and recipes here. Nothing to get you excited. Conversationally vanilla radio for your drive day. Well, here's a song by Chicago.
running
More
your
butter
ass
for
off.
your muffin? Would you like me to butter your muffin?
Oh yeah.